In the interest service, Power 88 presents live talk shows to inform, enlighten, and to stimulate thought and dialogue. The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of KCP or the EOB. Now sit back, relax, enjoy the program, and be sure to listen to Power 88 anytime from anywhere by downloading the KCP app.
Good morning to our listening audience. Good morning. And I think while it's late in the year now, well, it's not so much late, it's the second week. Happy New Year to you all. We were not with you last Saturday because the first Saturday of January was January 1, and obviously it was New Year's Day, and KCP was remote on that day. So thank you all for being here. I'd also like to thank our panelists who are here with us today, Imam Faheem, Shuaibe, Imam Earl, El-Amin, Sister Aneesah, Dawan. Thank you. Are you all here on the line this morning?
Yes, sir, we are.
Assalamu alaikum to all of you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Joining us here. The weather is nice and calm here in Southern Nevada and Las Vegas. And I know, Imam Shuaibe, you're close by in the Bay Area. I'm not sure about your weather. Imam El-Amin, in your part of the country, how's the weather?
We've had snow 2 times this week, and it's currently, as I'm speaking, 32 degrees. It's pretty warm today.
Yeah, we're at 32 is warm. We're at 68. And Sister Dawan, yourself, how are you, and how's the weather in your part of the country? How's the community?
Alhamdulillah, everyone is well. And since we are between the two of you, we are in the middle of sun and snow. So we just got a little rain.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules. I'd like to say to our listening audience, we'd like to thank you all for joining us again on another edition of Interfaith Intercultural Dialogue, which you know is on a monthly basis. We have an hour that we spend with you, and we appreciate your time. And obviously, of course, our backers and supporters, Silver Sage Foundation, our collaborative partners, KCEP Radio here, Power 88, the Interfaith Council of Southern Nevada, and our good friendships and interactions there, and the Multicultural Advisory Council from Metropolitan Police Department. We've been in the last 3 months, we've had discussions around Muslim scholars and theologians and men of insight. First, we had Said Nursi Bediüzzaman, the Turkish philosopher and poet, and a man of tremendous insight. And we followed up in December in the Turkish community in Turkey, particularly, they celebrate Jalaluddin Rumi. So we discussed Jalaluddin Rumi in December, and talking with our administrator and with the Silver Sage team, we came up with the idea: why not feature an American scholar and theologian, especially in this field of what we say is, in some cultures, in some societies, they call it Sufism. Here in the West, we probably call it mysticism or esoteric thought. There are many terms we could give to it. And what we looked at today was the Imam W.D. Mohammed. And our theme is the man means mind, and other mystical insights of Imam W.D. Mohammed. So the people who are our panelists who are here with us, to our listening audience, are all students, including myself, of Imam Warith Deen Mohammed. And we are drawing questions from. We have several questions. Imam Shuaibe made note that we have several. It's good to lay the foundation, but we're only going to get through X amount of those. So let me really get started. I wanted to share with you all from the book Thoughts for Searchers, Seeking to Understand Life, Reflections of W.D. Mohammed, edited by Imam Ronald B. Shaheed. And we can't thank Imam Shaheed enough for the fine work that he's done. And we're drawing questions from videos and tapes, and also from the books that he's published. But I want to draw from one of the comments in the book on what others think of Imam W.D. Mohammed and the profound impact that he had, not only in the Muslim world, but here in America in particular, but also in the Muslim world. And just to make note, it says that the genius of Imam W.D. Mohammed was that he single-handedly moved the African American community towards identifying with pluralistic American identity while moving away from black nationalist Islam. Today, millions of African American Muslims are comfortable with being as strongly American as they are being devout Muslims, demonstrating the two are not incompatible. This achievement is due entirely to Imam W.D. Mohammed, and these comments about Iqbal Ahmed from the Journey into America, the Challenge of Islam, the Brookings Institute's press. Imam Faheem Shuaibe, this transition that actually happened during the time when you, I think yourself and Imam Earl, and I'd like to get your comments first on this transition from the Nation of Islam to what we say Islam proper or Orthodox Islam. I think you were in the nation, you made the transition. Your observations in terms of that.
Alhamdulillah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and I with love and light in my heart, I greet my two co-panelists with a smile and love. It's been a long time since I've looked in either of your faces, but I'm glad to be here with you, connected. That being said, when the transition went to Al-Islam proper, as I said, with Imam Mohammed, it was a continuation of a journey. I felt, now in retrospect, I can use the analogy of Abraham moving from star, moon, and sun in the Quran, right? Because we thought we knew who God was when we were told the Nation of Islam, the original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, father of civilization, God of the universe. We actually believed that when we were given that, because it was a movement away from something that was definitely not satisfying. But then Imam Mohammed came and corrected our perception, and I won't extend it further, but the idea is, he didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there was great medicine in that particular take on it, but you could really only get the value of the medicine after it was reinterpreted for you properly, and what was toxic about it was taken away, but what was healthy in it remained, and that's what Imam Mohammed did for me and for us.
Imam El-Amin, I think you were probably a teenager about that time, were you, when the transition came, the impact on yourself?
Assalamu alaikum to my listeners, as well as you, Brother Imam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I was not a teenager. Ironically, I was a college student at Morgan State University in my sophomore year in college. When I first came into the community under the leadership of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and then made the transition. I think the question that you asked, for me, it was a natural evolution, and not to take up too much time, it was a natural evolution as going from an insular community, and with the vision of the Imam taking us from a very insular community, going into going into a mainstream and into the fabric of the American society, with the right perception of God. And I can say so much more, but like Imam Shuaibe had articulated earlier, we could be here all night long just on this topic itself.
No doubt about it.
Sister Dawan out also.
And Sister Dawan, now you were actually post the transition of Nation of Islam. If I'm getting the background on yourself correct, and all people speak highly of you, what is your observation having come? What year did you enter into the Islamic community under Imam's teaching?
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Well, assalamu alaikum to everyone. I echo your sentiments and not seeing each other, so it's good to be on the panel. I felt honored to be here. But I was born into Al-Islam under the leadership of Imam W.D. Mohammed, rahimallahu alayhi. So my whole mind and scope is of the language and logic. So yeah, this is my reality, right? What I can say of what I know. So I'm a student, so I studied before my life and I study, after my life. That's what any student will do, right? History matters. So what I can understand and what I'll express, I think, is similar to what they both said, is that transition that took place was one that was it was situated to always take place, right? It was never meant to not take place. So it wasn't for some. It may have been jarring because they didn't understand the direction and the movement that was being started in their own lives and for that whole community. But that community was established in order to evolve, and so the evolution of it was just a part of the reality as it's still evolving. And if we can understand where it started was where it had to start in order for it to evolve. So the language that was brought to the community of African Americans where they could understand God better, that language that was used, it was strategic language. So it was meant to evolve that community and to bring that community to a better understanding of God, but with a respect for the environment in which they are existing in, and that's in the United States of America, and that's what it did. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you for that perspective for all of you. Let me go. I want to just get so many things to be said, but I want to make sure I get as many of these questions in to get your scholarly, insightful knowledge on this. One of the first questions that we had, and it's connected to the theme, one of the early teachings, I didn't come into the community until 1982. I actually embraced in 1975, but came in, quote unquote, what they call an Orthodox Muslim community, but really didn't find it suiting my appetite, and it was 7 years later possibly that I came into the teachings of Imam Mohammed and then became a student like many of you, and then met many of you either directly and benefited from that and or spiritually like Sister Dawan. Imam El-Amin, one of the early teachings that I had heard about when I came in, someone introduced me to the book later. It was called Man Means Mind, and it was one of the most profound, revealing documents that I had read because it completely changed my paradigm, my perception as to how I saw man or how I saw the human being. This I consider to be somewhat, we would say, to me it's normal, common language, and to many of us it is. What was that language, man means mind, and what did it mean? Where did Imam point us to with that type of language, man means mind, as a theme?
I think the opposite word that you use in one sense is type. That the Imam was taking us. It just didn't mean the gender. It wasn't a gender. He wasn't pointing us to a gender. He was pointing us to a type, the human type. And the human type, he was saying that it's really for me as a student of the Imam, but also a student of Muhammad, the Prophet, praise and peace be upon him, that the Prophet said that there's nothing better than the aql in the Arabic language, but there's nothing better than the intelligence, the intellect. And so what the Imam was calling us to was mind. Mind meant that the human being, there was nothing more important for the human being but the intelligence, and for the human being to use the intelligence and understanding the context in which we came out of as a community. There was not a lot of what I would say free thinking taking place or exploratory thinking taking place. And so he was subliminally also calling us to be thinkers.
Yes, good. And so for me, probably growing up in the world I grew up in, I saw man as biological. That was my first journey into man was something other than just biological. And he says man, but Sister Dawan, that includes women also. While you weren't there doing that early teaching at that time, what is your perception of that as Imam gave the community a new paradigm of what being a human being was? What is your observation as a woman?
And I will tell you, so I know, right, I understand man means mind, but also understood the language that he gave even with that, and woman means womb of mine. And for me, in looking at it and understanding both of them, and once again, as a student, and knowing that even Imam Mohammed, rahimahullah alayhi, when he said it, he's understood. He's recorded as saying, even when he gave the language, when he gave that knowledge at that point in time, he didn't fully have like this big plan for it. He knew he had to say it, but he didn't really understand all of the fullness of the impact. But he knew that the language and the people needed to change from looking at just biology as a reality for themselves. So for women also had to do that. You had to move away from being so stuck in the physical flesh as being your being, and more of your condition, right? And this is what Imam Mohammed explained, that it's a condition for the human life, not the circumstance, not the reality of it, so to speak. So for me, I mean, it's very liberating. It's extremely liberating to know that it is not your flesh that is your beginning, but is merely a mode and a condition of your life, and it carries you to another life.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I hope that's insightful for not just, but particularly for women to hear that concept from yourself. Imam Shuaibe, Imam Warith Deen Mohammed, I remember this very beautiful, not only we see you as an excellent Imam there at Masjid Waritheen, but I remember this Dawan that you called, that's the call to prayer for Muslims, where Imam gave a major presentation at, and I know being a direct student of his, he helped found Masjid Waritheen there in Oakland and East Oakland. What is your perception of that, being directly in touch with him during those times, the concept man means mine? Underline that for us, please.
Yeah, I can only underscore what's already been said. You know, he was giving us a new world view, a new total view of life, interior and exterior. So he was changing our perception of what our identity was, and taking our identity, as has already been said, off of the flesh and putting it on the mind, on the interior as opposed to the exterior, and getting us to think and learn how to see abstractly. That is, to see the unseen, if you will, to give reality to the unseen, and also have a new locus for the idea of what is our true self. Right. So who are you? Who are you really? Right. So that was the basic beginning of that. Is the first thing to understand is that you're a mind. You're not a body. You're a mind. And so then that set us up to shift our perceptions and again create the condition, as been mentioned, create the conditions where we can grasp other ideas that are intangible.
Let me extend it into a question that will be, I believe, similar to that. In 1987, I happen to have been in Los Angeles when he was speaking there. I believe Imam Shuaibe, possibly, I'm sure, almost certainly yourself was there. And he introduced a concept called Adam, the Universal Man. Adam, the Universal Man. Interesting title. There were 3 sets of cassettes that were produced out of that. I listened to them for almost 7 months over and over, just trying to digest them. Brother Imam, we finished with you last. I want to come back to you now. Adam, the Universal Man. What is this Adam, the Universal Man, that Imam Mohammed was bringing light to in our lives, and how do we apply that?
Yeah, that's really, Adam is the whole story. So I'll just say one or two things maybe. One of the statements that the Imam gave is the story of Adam is the story of how God created the first person, and that's the story of how God created every person. So when you talk about the universal human being, then that's what's meant. When at that, Imam Mohammed making that clear to us, one of the questions in the Nation of Islam, so that people can understand that there is a connection, how can you say, intellectually, with that past, because Farad Muhammad, who was the founder of the Nation of Islam, such as it was, he gave us these lessons, right? And in these lessons, who is the original man, right? And then part of which I just stated earlier. But the original man, most of us all the time before, the idea was Adam. right? That's what. So then we were. So it was being introduced to tell us about, the original man. So now the clarification is now who is Adam really? Who is Adam really? And what Imam Mohammed, when he began to explain something that's always in front of us, both before and during the Nation of Islam, then he worked to get us to, now let me tell you what it really is, right? Okay. And so I'm going to boil it down to really just one word, right? Humanity, right? Humanity. It's a big word when you understand it, but it's a large part, if not the largest part of Imam Muhammad's mission, was to restore the right perception of human identity. And as the Imam said, his mission was a mission of language. You can take that word human identity and then you can make a composite term out of it, the common humanity. Our humanity is our human identity, and that is what's being lost. Last thing I'll say right now is Imam Mohammed had the title for a long time, and even to the end of his mission, that he was the Muslim American spokesman for human salvation. Human salvation. Muslim American spokesman for human salvation. So why? I mean, one of the answers is that humanity, in its true nature and in its true perception, had been lost, and nobody was speaking for it. So he said, "Well, I'll be the Muslim American spokesman. There may be some other spokesman for it, but I'll be the Muslim American spokesman for human salvation."
Thank you, Brother Imam. Shuaibe, Sister Dawan, I want to go to Surah 4, Ayat 1, because it's relevant to the first two questions, I believe, and the fact that God says he created us from one single soul, and from that soul he created its mate. And later on it talks about, in reverence the womb that bore you. So this man, this Adam, this universal man, in the book by one of the editions, The Women Who Call to the Issue, Imam Ronald Shaheed covered Imam's tafsir on this Nefsin Wahida, created from one soul. And in there, the implication is that this soul was feminine. Is there any implication that, so we're saying the first human being was feminine? Is that the implication that is there? Or give us your insight from a female perspective and a Muslim perspective.
Yes, alhamdulillah. So it just does, it actually is all connected. So it's similar to what Imam Shuaibe was saying, is that in order to deal with Adam, you have to deal with the Nafsin Wahida. Right, in order to give it justice and understanding its originality, then you have to also deal with the origin of the soul. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the first ayat of Surah An-Nisa of the surah, literally is under the women, that Allah says that He khalaqa minha min nafsin wahida, that I made the two of them from one soul. Right, so he said he first created the soul, and then he khalaqa minha zawjaha wa batha minhuma rijalan kathiran wa nisaa, that he made the soul, and then he created from the two of them men and women. And Imam Mohammed, he actually explained that although the soul, and this is within Quranic Arabic, the soul is feminine in its structure, in its grammatical structure, but for the Muslim, and this is where you get the issues of where you want to start, and people will say this is there's a form of mysticism, or this is symbolic language, and the point of symbolism is to bring clarity through the symbols, and then by way of the symbol it extends to so many different things, and you're not stuck with a certain pattern just by the physical nature of it. So if you stick on the physical thought process of the grammatical structure, and you say that the soul is feminine in its structure, and then therefore it's a woman, right? It's a female, then you'll miss the point. The soul is feminine, meaning that it has the principle of femininity. The principle of the feminine thing means that it gives birth to both male and female things. One. And then therefore the soul has no choice in its principle, in the way that it operates, that it is feminine in that structure only, but it is not feminine in its reality, meaning that it exists as a woman. It exists as a principle of femininity, meaning that it delivered out from it both males and females. So the soul, even according to the logic of Quran and according to what Imam Mohammed has given in his tafsir, is that the soul in and of itself holds both males and females within it, which is why the woman, the physical woman, holds from herself both males and females from her.
And thank you. So, sister, I was going to say alhamdulillah in the middle of it, but I'll say it till the end of it. This wonderful dissertation on that. Thank you. Imam El-Amin, on either Adam, the universal man, or this soul as the feminine, as a principle, your comments and your ideas on this, please.
Well, sometimes you have to just not talk. I want to say that was an excellent dissertation. And, the Arabs have a saying, it's a khalas, that's it. We don't need to follow up on it anymore.
Nothing else needs to be said. Just as a note as a sidebar, while we're in this discussion, we're here in Southern Nevada having the memorial services for former United States Senator Harry Reid, who was born in Searchland, Nevada, and became probably one of the most powerful men in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that was mentioned during the presentation this morning is that sometimes the senator would have hung up the phone and the person would still be talking. And one of his words was, once you finish, you finish. You don't have to say anything else. So, Imam, I think you kind of underscored Senator Reid's perception there.
Well, I like to say this. It's ironic, and I think it all ties in. But I was invited to be the khatib to give the khutbah on Capitol Hill a few years ago, and Harry Reid was still the head there. And his aide, the individual that was a brother that's an imam in our association by the name of Idris Bridges. He was he worked at Capitol Hill for Senator Harry Reid, and I got to get to know him very well. He's out of Washington D.C. He's now the chaplain for the Maryland National Guard. But I think that's part of all of what we're talking about when all these questions and everything. If we tie everything in, that what the Imam's vision was and how we in the fabric of American society. So that just was a tidbit, I guess.
No, I appreciate that, Brother Imam Shuaibe. As we speak of that in the matters of contemporary issues, and Imam, had showed great reverence for the Constitution. He showed real insight into the founders of the Constitution, identifying in some cases that many of them were Quranically educated. Many of them came from mystical backgrounds. Imam Earl, you and I were talking about that. How do you think Imam would capitalize this, like the January 6th event that happened? How do you think he would see that as it relates to democracy? Imam Shuaibe.
Yes, I would think that that Imam Mohammed's perception will be. Let's start from. I was thinking about another brother, Imam Earl, or Aneesah may very well know. There's a brother who published a book. I think the title is America's Other Imam or something like that.
Yes.
I'm not certain.
Yes, America's Imam.
Yeah, he's the out of Raleigh, North Carolina. So his father's Imam Oliver Mohammed.
No, he has the America's Imam. But the point is, if you've seen the book, you see Imam Mohammed walking across the stage at Elijah Muhammad's Masjid carrying the flag. And this was in the.
Oh, you're talking about Muhammad Abdul. You're talking about Dr. Muhammad Fraser Abdul Rahim.
Okay,
America's Other Muslims. Exactly. Yeah, America. Yeah, I was talking to him last night. America's Other Muslims. That's the book.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. And so you have on that flag a very powerful moment, and I have to use the language that the Imam used when he was talking about how significant, how important, because the flag used to mean to us in the Nation of Islam a symbol of slavery, suffering, and death, right? And then Imam Mohammed comes in, he's trying to get us to understand that we need to have a new world patriotism, right? It's not the old world patriotism. We're not patriotic to the old world. We need a new world patriotism. And so his vision was not set on the world of America as it is or as it was at that time. The idea was for a new world patriotism. So his respect was for the original ideas the best of the original ideas that were in the minds of the founding fathers. I want to mention one anecdote. Since we're back there in the Baltimore, Maryland, D.C. area, I was there as a guest of Sharif Abdul Malik for an event there, and there was a preacher, pastor, whatever the kindest way of saying it. I'm rushing a bit. He was also a guest there, and he gave an anecdote of Imam Mohammed. And when Imam Mohammed had come to visit him, and when the Imam visited him, the Imam came into his office, and he had the library. The Imam looked at a book that was on the shelf, and the book was by a Reinhold Niebuhr, that is Moral Man in Immoral Society, right? And the Imam said, "Oh, this is the book there. You read that?" And they said, "Yes." He said, "How many times have you read it?" The Imam asked him, "How many times have you read it?" He said, "I read it 3 times." Then the Imam said, "I read it 9 times. Okay? Now, if you get some idea about who this Reinhold Niebuhr is, he's a big name in American ideals, etc. And there's the irony of American democracy or something, the irony of American history. All of that to say, what I'm saying is that the Imam has the best, the purest perception of what democracy is supposed to be. And what we're seeing right now, those who really know and hold it sacred in their heart, they know that it's an attack on what is and was the best of the ideals that we have. Finally, to end my comment on it, where the Imam said they were, speaking of the founding fathers, they were given, G-E-I-V-E-N, they were given an idea that was bigger than they were, right? So it's like, God did bless America with that idea. And the Imam is always, and we stand in the same position, we have to defend the ideals in the abstract that it stands for to make them real. So whatever offends that offends us. Right? And put all the other stuff aside. Because if we lose what it's supposed to be, because it's still an experiment, hey man, it's a serious problem.
Sister Dawan, do you think most Americans are seeing what some are articulating to us as a threat to democracy and what Imam Shuaibe has actually underlined here? Do you think Americans are seeing that?
Well, I guess I can speak for myself. I think what people are seeing is the reality of democracy being realized. So the same way that the realization of democracy is by way of slavery, right? That it was by way of slavery that America moved toward that ideal that was set forth at the beginning, that bringing slaves coming through America and being liberated, and the whole process of African Americans gaining a space in the United States is a big part of how we see freedom and liberty and justice. So this is a part of that continued evolution, and that's what I think people see right now. And as much as the actions that people have that are threats, they merely bring to the surface that things that were already there. It's not an issue of a thing that wasn't in existence. It's just the issue of that thing being brought to light. And when it's brought to light, it's dealt with.
It's like anti-Semitism existed before Hitler. He just brought it and put it right in the forefront of people.
There you go.
Imam Earl, you're right there in the Beltway. Your family background, being in politics in Baltimore, being a mentee of Kwasi and Fumi, who was in the United States Congress and became a very powerful congressman. Your observations about January 6th and how America sees itself, and how would Imam see this in terms of his understanding of and application of democracy?
I think I like to not digress, but go back. The Imam was very, very adamant about the founding fathers and the document, the Constitution, and the influence. And I think you and I had this conversation around the founding fathers. 75% of the founding fathers were what they called then deists, which now we know as Unitarian Christians. James Madison. We know Thomas Jefferson and many other of the the founding fathers were very, very familiar with the Quran, and they were also in Freemasons, Masons. So the Imam was adamant about that the document would never have been produced if there would not have been the influence of the Quran on the founding fathers. Now, with that being said, I think and Imam Ronald Shaheed on his commentary of Imam Warith Deen Mohammed on Islam and the American democracy, and I think you can find that also in that document also. But I think being here and right next to it, ironically, last year on January 6th, I was sitting in the Musalla with a group with Dr. Muhammad Fraser Rahim and the FBI and the Baltimore City Police Department, and our phone started going off. And the FBI agent looked at me, and I said, "Well," he said, "What's going on?" I said, "They're storming the Bastille." And we immediately shut the meeting down. You know, I mean, I was serious, but being up close on it and seeing it for what it was is I can't articulate it better than what we just heard from my colleagues. That this was something that was manifesting itself for a period of time, as the old grand folks used to say. What is in the dark will always come to light. And so what happened was what was in the dark and it came to light. So you're seeing that throughout already. It manifested itself. So now it's out in the open.
It'll be interesting where we go to now. It's out in the open. Sister, Imam Shuaibe, there's a term that Imam Mohammed would use, and Sister Dawan was speaking about the freedom that came through the Emancipation Proclamation as a result of the Civil War. In that language, there's always some dialogue around, what was Abraham Lincoln's motivation and to the Emancipation Proclamation. But from the experience of slavery, Imam would use a term that I quite found myself insulted by when I first heard it, and said to myself, well, I'm not like that. He said, we inherited the slave's personality. And at that conscious level for me, it offended me. I didn't inherit a slave's personality. And later on, my mother, she was telling me about, you didn't just get your physical features from your father, you inherited some other things from him also, which helped me understand more about what Imam was saying. What about that idea, that concept that Imam would on occasions mention to many of us, that we inherited the slave's personality?
Yeah, the explicitness and your feeling of it that you mentioned would be understandable if that is an explicit quote from the Imam. I understand the gist of it, but if I was on the witness stand, I couldn't say that he said it that way. But what he said, he has what I'm remembering, the idea of, he talked about slave ghosts, and how those things still influence us. I think the more accurate way of understanding it, if not expressing it, is that we all, DNA carries everything. Everything all the way back to Adam, everything that ever happened in the line that led to us being here, it is in us, but it's in us latent, not necessarily, that is everything, not necessarily expressed. Just like Adam was taught the knowledge of the nature of all things. So inside of us is the knowledge of the nature of all things as well, but none of us are expressing all of the knowledge of the nature of all things within us. That has to do with the environment. So whatever the environment stimulates, reinforces, supports, etc., that's that it will come out. So you do have those who are expressly suffering from what could be described as slave personality, and those who came in that line and were quote unquote socialized and acculturated in this environment, quite likely the potential for becoming such a slave in expression, in personality. Yeah, people like Carter G. Woodson, et cetera, talking about if you control a man's mind, you don't have to worry about his behavior. And to point to the fact that everybody didn't inherit that in expressed terms or didn't express it, even though it may have been there latently in the DNA. You get the Harriet Tubmans, the Sojourner Truths, the Nat Turners, the Frederick Douglasses, the Ida B. Wells. It's like, you can't really say that they are slave personalities, right? Mm-hmm. But the fact that they carry in them that history, that's it. It's the environment that makes it manifest. And that's what, when we see those people who are acting expressly in ways that are contrary to human excellence and the like, and are reflective of the kind of mentality that the slaves showed, well, it's the product of the environment. As the Quran says, everyone acts according to the way that they have been socialized. So, it's kind of yes and no in there.
If I may, brother Imam, if I may, I think we also to pivot off of that. There's a term in science. It's called epigenetics, and it's everything, and it's really everything is in your genetic memory. On numerous occasions, I've heard the Imam say something that was funny, but it was very poignant, and that was, he said, he would admonish us and say, we still old Negroes and new Muslims. But he didn't say Negroes. He used another word. Right. But I'm going on the air. Right. Old Negroes and new Muslims. Now, he was pointing us to the duality that exists within us, as it relates to, as Imam Shuaibe has so articulated so well, that this inheritance is in your DNA and it's in your genetic memory. The question was asked, Dr. C. Eric Lincoln, who coined that phrase. He said, how did you people come to Islam? And he said, through your genetic memory. That when we heard, because even though the institution of slavery and how horrific it was, but when we heard the word Quran, when we heard the word Muhammad, there was something in our genetic memory that ticked us off and called us to that, which was already in our DNA.
Interesting. Sister Dawan, I want to keep with the same question, but there's a term now being used in many in social science called transgenerational trauma. And one recent book I read, My Grandmother's Hands, by Resma Menachem, he said that trauma transcends sometimes thousands of years, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years of trauma can show up in people years later. That concept, again, the inheritance of what had happened to our ancestors in slavery, can that still affect our psyche today? Or does it?
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, that's completely in line, and it actually is where, I was going to go with my statement on all of it, is that Allah literally says in the Quran, right, that oppression, right, that the oppression of a group of people, or oppression itself, is worse than killing. I mean, it is worse than just slaughtering someone. So if we can understand that the effects of a mass murder of a group of people is not going to have the same lasting effects as if you take that same group of people, instead of just killing that group of people and allowing that society to move on from those deaths, is you actually take that community and you oppress them. And so you take the movement, you take what happened to those Africans that were brought over to the United States and to other parts of the Americas, and you take those group of people and now you take and you put centuries of oppression on top of them. Then if Allah is letting us know that it is worse, that means that the effects and what happens to that group of people, it takes a lot more to move away from it. So it's moving still back to why there was a need for the language inside of the Nation of Islam, is because it was moving a group of people who had been oppressed for so long out of that oppression mindset. And so that's where the language was needed, which takes us back once again to what was the need to understand who the original man was. It is to connect that oppressed soul back to its original connection to Adam, who has the knowledge of all things given by way of his Lord, given by way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's where it becomes necessary for the human being to connect back to that original makeup, so you can understand just how big your single soul is connected to all of the other souls. And it's like it is that full circle. So yes,
Imam,
it definitely is affecting.
Thank you, Imam Shuaibe. The idea that this what is in the creation itself, what's in the environment, in the Quran 30:30, it talks about this idea. Could we say that man, Adam being the universal man, that man is a microcosm of the entire creation, and that everything is in the creation is in the human being?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I want to abbreviate because I know time is getting short on this. Here's an example. There is, let's go ahead and put a little mystical seasoning on the conversation, too, where they have what's called the Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes. And one of the first principles is the all is in the small. The all is in the small. This can actually be illustrated with a drawing. You and I can show you how to draw a picture that shows that the all is in the small, right? So these kinds of insights that man came to over just his existence, this intellect that is his, that was made as a mate for the creation. The creation as a mate for the mind as well, that he comes to these understandings. And so in terms of macrocosm, microcosm, think about a CD, a CD disc, right? This disc where it could be an orchestra playing. Right, an orchestra is playing, right, and so when you play the CD, you have the violins, the oboes, the timpanis, the whatever, the triangle, everything. It's you hearing all those sounds, but those actual instruments are not actually on that CD, but everything that they bring to the whole is captured by the CD. Okay, so the point is that there's a sun out there in the solar system that we're in, but there's a sun in me also, but it's not that sun that's out there, but there is a representation, a functional correlate for the sun out there to a sun in me. And the same thing with everything else, the animals, the trees, the plants, the wind, all of that that's out there concretely is also inside of me. Abstractly, it just has the function inside of me that is cognitive, intellectual, spiritual, as opposed to the physical role that is played by those things in the external environment.
Okay, thank you. Look, I think that we were saying that old country talk. Y'all cooking in here today. Look, brother Imam El-Amin. Many Imam had set aside times during the month of Ramadan where he would meet with community members wherever he was at in the country. What are some of your most esoteric, mystical insights that have come from the month of Ramadan? Can you share one with us? Now, I ask each of you any of your insights from the month of Ramadan sessions that he would host during the month of Ramadan, the month of fasting.
So many of them, but one of the things I think for me, and I think we got to be real careful with esoteric, using using the word esoteric as well as mystical. The Imam used to always say, in definition, there is direction. So I think we should always define it, and that gives us our direction. But for me, I don't know if it's esoteric or not, but
let's say mystical.
I don't know.
Say there.
The mihraj, the ascension, the evolution, where the prophet goes from stage to stage. The Quran says, "Verily, you shall travel from stage to stage." And the prophet, praise and peace be upon him, he goes from stage to stage. And the Imam had defined it. He begins as Adam, and then he goes to Jesus and John, and then he goes to Yusuf, Joseph, and then he goes to Idris, then he goes to Musa, and then he evolves to Musa. Did I say Musa? I said Aaron, then Musa, and then to Ibrahim. and the evolution of that is the human is the total human being. But in each one of them, each one of the prophets, that there was something that what the human being had within them, and it would have to be brought out. For me, that was something. I mean, it's thousands of things, but I mean, that was just something that I always will cherish and use all of the time in a lot of my presentations.
Well, thank you for that insight. And we're going to post this on YouTube, so we'll have a chance to go back and review it. Sister Dawan, the idea of the month of Ramadan sessions, were there any particular insights that you drew from those, we say, in that mystical realm of Imam sharing with us? Any insights that you had?
So because, of course, my many of these sessions initially that were done, I was very young. So my later movement on Ramadan sessions, when I was actually at Ramadan sessions, is when he opened it up more to everyone. And I can remember studying some, and of course, I'm going to come from the ones that I studied, I think directly where he provided the information and I studied it, versus those that I read later or listened to later and got the information, was the movement of the soul, right? The movement of the soul and its progression and its advancement. And I can just remember studying that and then having now an understanding of the soul. So we will talk about the soul in its state or in its existence, and we talk about it in its connection to the body. I have a soul, I have a body. But then understanding that the soul has progressions and movements, and then relating the progressions and the movements of your soul to how you're responding, right, to your environment, because it's mating, because your soul and your physical body they're operating together, they're interacting together in order to bring about what it is that you do, what it is that you accomplish, how it is that you operate in life. So going through the levels of the soul right there for myself, it really affected me and how I operated. I was like, I no longer want to be a baby soul. I don't want to be a nafsul armada, right? I want to be self-reproaching. And then, inshallah, I want to get to a point where my soul is at peace because I am obedient, and knowing that reality was possible, inshallah.
That could have been the whole discussion, could have been around those three levels of the soul. And maybe in the next time we have a discussion like this, Imam Shuaibe, Imam Mohammed had often noted, he said, in physical sciences, that man has accomplished a great deal in the Western world. We have space travel now to where people are going to the edge of the atmosphere and looking down at a commercial level. They're all in awe of it. But Imam said that in the spiritual realm, the human being was still on the frontier. Could you expand up on that for us, that in the material realm, because we have a lot of conflict when it comes to physical things as a result of science. But he says the spiritual sciences, that was so much work to be done there.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel the need to underscore Imam El-Amin's statement about our caution with the language. I have to say that, to your point, the issue is the Iqbal, who is one of these great seers, I'll call it, and luminaries in Islamic history, Muhammad Iqbal, the Imam introduced us to him, and one of Iqbal's statements is that the laws of nature are the garments of reality. The laws of nature are the garments of reality. And this goes to the issue of the ghurur, the idea of the illusory, the illusionary type of quality of life in its reality, and even those laws that you see operating and functioning, which Imam Mohammed invites us to be the foundation for our patterns of thought. Even those, they are still external to the nature of reality. There are those who say that the physical laws tell us about the operations of creation, but nothing about its nature. It tells us about how things operate, but it doesn't give us the message about its nature. So when we are what we are looking for, when we are trying to understand how those patterns and the laws of nature relate to us, which both of my peers on the panel here have pointed to, if they had time, it could be elaborated on, because it's all about building a bridge between the laws and the patterns and the operation of creation and what's going on in your heart, mind, and soul. When you can build that bridge, make those connections, that's how you're able to grow your life in this world and have the kind of impact that Allah wants you to have in this life. But you have to get those tools that come from the very first revelation. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. And I'll stop there.
So there is much work for us to be done in the spiritual realm in terms of pioneering this.
Let me mention, there was one comment, Imam, forgive me. There is one comment that I've heard it phrased this way because it's so succinct that I want to share it. It says that we spirituality is the physics that we have yet to understand. And I think the Dalai Lama is the one that's credited with saying that. Spirituality is the physics that we have yet to understand. So we understand quantum physics and the like, but we still don't understand spirituality. It's another kind of physics that we don't yet understand.
We could have taken one of these questions and one of you and had the discussion. I'm thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we had all of you here. I hope our listening audience gain benefits and insights from it, in particular from what we say is the thoughts and the insights of Imam Warith Deen Mohammed. We have approximately 5 minutes left. I would hear from me, and let me mention also next month in February, our panel discussion. I think we're going to still be honored by having the presence of Imam Faheem Shuaibe, and he will be joined by 2 other scholars to discuss racism, the caste system, racism, and the Holocaust. And we're going to draw from Isabel Wilkinson's book on the caste system. Now, that being said, any closing comments from our panelists and anything that you may have wanted to share with us in terms of the mystical thoughts and ideas of Imam Warith Deen Mohammed? Sister Dawan, yourself first, please.
Alhamdulillah. So I think I'm just going to say, chiming in, everything that Imam Mohammed brought, even the discussions of esoteric or mysticism, was to make the things plain for people. So it wasn't to bring about mysticism, it was to clear it and to make it understood. And the things that where esoteric language was used, it was very intentional, and it was only meant for the group of people in order to bring them into light. So every instance of the use of mysticism or esoteric was all about benefit and not about hiding knowledge or hiding information from the people. It truly was to enlighten. And so that's all I would say. And I felt like this was like a lightning round. Alhamdulillah, it was good.
No, thank you also very much. Imam, sure, just another point, just if you could touch on briefly in your closing, is that Imam often talked about mythology and how mythology affected us, and how we don't have to see mythology as real, but what it points us to has a reality to it, if you would.
Yeah. I mean, that is. Mythology is abstract, and the abstract is actually pointing to something that is actual, that is scientific, and that is very real. If I can mention just one anecdote that goes in line with what we're talking about, and on an occasion I traveled with Imam Mohammed and the eponymous, I believe we would say it that way, Farad Mohammed, who's Muhammad Abdullah, here in Oakland. So we went to an area nearby in the Bay Area to see someone that they had heard about, and they were supposed to, they wanted to meet them. So it was a private meeting. It was the 4 of us were actually there: Imam Mohammed, Muhammad Abdullah / Farad Mohammed, and this person who was said to be some mystic or what have you. And so we sat down. Oh, okay. Well, okay, we got to go. So let me cut to the quick. One of the things that the Imam said when we went to lunch and they were talking to each other, he and Muhammad Abdullah, Muhammad Abdullah said, I never heard anyone who was really a Sufi called himself a Sufi. And then Imam Mohammed replied to him, he's saying, Imam, speaking of himself, he says, I'm a Sufi, but I'm a rational Sufi.
I think I used the term intellectual, Brother Imam El-Amin, and you have about 30 seconds, and we're going to close out, God willing.
Well, like Imam Shuaibe, I'm fortunate enough to have the